Since William Billy Murphy Jr.'s successful defense of boxing promoter Don King in 1998 in a federal criminal jury that garnered national and international attention, he and his small but mighty Baltimore law firm, Murphy, Falcon Murphy, have gained a national reputation for legal excellence as trial lawyers. The Murphy firm is the oldest Black and Hispanic law firm in the country and was founded by Billy's father, Judge William Bill Murphy Sr. in 1947. Like his father, who was the first Black lawyer in Maryland history to represent a Black man in a death penalty case, was brave enough to represent Alger Hiss and members of the Communist Party during the dark days of the McCarthy era, and was respected enough to win a challenge election to the District Court of Maryland in November 1970, where he served with distinction for 34 years. Billy's first love was criminal law. After joining his father in February 1970, Billy's first client was a notorious Black Panther Party, and his first career cross-examinations were of the head of the Maryland FBI and the notoriously racist Baltimore City Police Chief Donald Pomeroy. During his first 10 years as a lawyer, Billy quickly developed the largest criminal law practice in Maryland, trying hundreds of criminal jury and bench trials, literally back to back, and winning an astounding 91% of them. Along the way, he won the largest police brutality verdict in the history of Maryland in 1978 and the largest medical malpractice verdict in the history of Maryland in 1979. Because of his unprecedented success in numerous headline cases that garnered local and national attention and his progressive politics that transcended race, a coalition of Blacks and progressive whites propelled him to unseat an incumbent judge in a challenge election to the Circuit Court for Baltimore City in November 1980, where he served as a judge until 1983. That year, at the behest of Black community leaders and elected officials who wanted him to become Baltimore's first Black mayor, he resigned to run against William Donald Schaefer, one of the most popular mayors in Baltimore history. And after he was defeated, he resumed private practice at the helm of his firm in 1984. The Murphy firm has burnished its national reputation by helping its clients to achieve a $6.4 million police brutality settlement in the death of Freddie Gray, a $20 million police brutality settlement in the police murder of William Green, a $44 million police brutality verdict. Police caused Albert Mosley to become a quadriplegic, a $3.5 million settlement for the heat stroke death of University of Maryland football player Jordan McNair, a $380 million class action settlement against credit rating giant Equifax for failing to keep safe the personal data of millions of Americans, a $276 million verdict against First Union Bank for taking and exploiting the software of a small businessman, a $180 million settlement for the former merry-go-round clothing chain, and class and mass action settlements of $55 million, $50 million, and $14 million for Maryland victims of water pollution, improper heart stents, and squalid housing conditions. The Murphy firm successfully defended Microsoft in separate class actions brought by superstar lawyers Johnny Cochran and Willie Gary, who sought $8.5 billion. Johnson & Johnson when it was sued for $6 billion, and Scottsdale's Insurance when it was sued for $7 billion. To put the icing on the cake, the Murphy firm has successfully represented entertainment superstars such as Sean Puffy Combs, Russell Simmons, Common, Mary J. Blige, and Missy Elliott. He has represented former Atlantic Mayor Maynard Jackson, Congressman Kwesi Mfume, former NAACP national presidents Julian Bond and Ben Jealous, former Republican National Chairman Michael Steele, and numerous state and local elected officials. Inspired by David, Billy's small but mighty Baltimore law firm has used his slingshot to crush multiple Goliaths during his 74-year history. He has earned enormous respect from lawyers, big law firms, and the firm's thousands of clients across the country, and has won almost 200 national and local awards for legal excellence and, most importantly, for community service. Billy Murphy, how are you, sir?
Was that me?
That was you.
No,
that was you. And it was just an honor to introduce you and to welcome you here, because when you talk about Baltimore legacies and Baltimore foundation builders, when you mention the names of people who've helped Baltimore to become what it is, your name is always mentioned. Your legacy in so many ways has been established. You were 14 years old when you first started organizing in your community. So can you take us back to the public health crises that happened in Cherry Hill and how you jumped into action?
Well, before we do that, all those things that you read about me, they would not have been possible without my parents, Bill and Madeline Murphy, who are responsible for 95% of whatever is good about me, and I'll take full responsibility for the rest. I feel truly blessed to have landed in that family and to be raised by those two giants in Cherry Hill, where I learned everything about what was happening to Black people that was not cool, you know? So I just want to start with that. Look, when I was 14, my mother made me form an organization in Cherry Hill. It was called Insight, and INCITE. And my job was to put together enough community people to fight successfully against keeping the incinerator. We had a huge trash dump in Cherry Hill. It caused rat infestations throughout the community. And it was an unsanitary and toxic presence in the community. And it had been there from the beginning of the community. And we wanted to get rid of it. And so my job was to organize the community into a strong enough force to have it shut down and have that dump removed and encapsulated, and they're no longer there. So I owe that to my mother and father. You know, I feel like I was a Hebrew slave back in the day. You know, they made me do things, and I had no choice but to do them.
Now, I'm glad you brought your father to the table because your father's legacy as a staunch civil rights supporter, as a judge, even being involved in a test case for the integration of University of Maryland Law School is something that's talked about a lot. But in talking about your father, can you talk about how we instill a legacy for the pursuit of justice in our children, the way your father did with you?
Well, I was truly blessed. We talked about politics literally every day. And we talked about national politics, world politics, and local politics. We talked about Black history every day. We talked about what was going on in the world every day, what the important developments that were happening that affected us, but happened in other parts of the world. Unless you get that kind of outlook, it's very difficult to navigate in America. When you are a neighborhood person rather than a national or international person, meaning in terms of your outlook, you only see a fraction of the opportunities that are available. You don't understand what's going on around you, and things just kind of happen to you and you don't know why. And your most enlightened assumptions reflect not knowing the root causes of the poverty that we see around us in Baltimore, the discrimination that we see, the racism, the sexism, the low wages, the attacks on unions. All of these things, you know, they happen, but unless you have a historical framework, by being well educated, you don't know why they're happening. And the public school system that we have today is a fraction of the school system that I enjoyed as a child. All of my teachers were PhDs and master's degrees because they couldn't get employment in private industry or in government. And so the only place that they could earn a living was either at the post office or teaching school or being a minister. And so we had these amazingly gifted Black people who were teaching public school and gave us a first-class education. Today, and they also taught about the history of Black people, right. But today, none of that exists. And you don't get it in the suburban schools because they're run by white folks who are unenlightened about the history and don't understand the deficits when they teach so-called American history of not having us involved. And so the only place you can really learn it is if you're motivated to go outside of the normal educational opportunity and start reading for yourself and learning to be a critical thinker and understanding what is going on, why it's going on, how it's going on, and why it may continue to go on, or what you can do to stop the bad of it to keep going on.
Now, what you have, Billy, is you have the long eye of history. And I think a lot about that because I think now people are so focused on the now. It's Trump now, it's white supremacy now, that they don't realize that this is all built upon what was previously put in place. Can you talk a little bit about that need for critical race theory and how to understand Trump today? You have to understand the long arm of the KKK from then. Like, it's not just in piecemeal, it's connected.
Well, the people who win the battle, whether it is by fair or foul means, or whether it was moral or immoral to fight in the first place, write the history. And so what we get in America is white history through the victor. Meaning the person who extinguished the Indian populations, or the people who extinguished the Indian populations, the people who beat the labor unions, the people who suppressed women, the people who created slavery, the people who maintained slavery and the so-called Reconstruction destruction, and then the segregation. And all these are euphemisms, by the way. They're terms designed to make it look a whole lot better than it was. This was forced labor by violence and intimidation and terror of the worst kind. And so we don't know that history. When I say we, the average white person doesn't know that history, and the average black person doesn't know that history. And so we're fighting these battles without the benefit of it. And so we don't know why we're in the position we're in today. And if you don't know why, you can't understand what is going on, and you can't see the future, because, you know, people who are ignorant of their history are doomed to repeat it. And the beat goes on.
I want to talk a little bit about the heart and soul of this country, because I heard someone say something that has stayed with me. This is a woman that called my show, and she said her grandfather told her, you need to know the country you live in. You need to know that you're being taught and led by people who would have sold your children on the way to church to pay off a gambling debt. And that if you don't get that, then you are expecting more than they're prepared to give you. You're not willing to demand what you should get. Do you think that's where we still are at this moment?
Oh, very much so. The terrible thing about today is that it's reminiscent of Nazi Germany right before Hitler took power. And he started out respecting the democratic system in Germany, but his real plan was to become the world's dictator and to exterminate large populations in favor of whites who he thought were the superior race. And we see that the table has been set similar to what it was set back then, where you have this absolute enmity, hatred, anger by one group of people against another. And it's intractable. It just doesn't subject itself to reason or analysis or facts or any rational notion of how to understand what the other side is saying and how to solve the problems, etc. It's really scary. Trump has unleashed the hatred that has existed in America from its beginning towards us. And because we have never taught it away, we have never eliminated that kind of hatred, and because we have forced it under the surface where it still exists in communities that are predominantly white and predominantly Southern, although it exists all over the country to a varying degree, because we haven't done anything about it, it's there. It's there in the unconscious minds of people, as Frances Cress Welsing used to say, the great Black psychiatrist. It's in the subconscious of people, and Trump brought it back to the conscious level. And as Frances Cress Welsing predicted, when she went to Germany and saw how the Germans just got murderous. The entire country became murderous of its own people. She understood that when you leave these things in the unconscious without resolving them, without teaching them away, without showing the people who have these views how wrong they are. And it's not just a simple matter of talking to them, because that doesn't work.
Right.
You have to educate people generationally that these things are immoral, that they're wrong, that they're contrary to the highest level of American values. And because that hasn't been done, what is in the unconscious has become conscious. And it's, again, a murderous rage. And so what is about to happen, and I hope I'm wrong, is that instead of this being a half put together revolt against the power of government that we saw on January the 6th, it's going to be a well thought out, violent series of episodes, and our lives are going to be at risk. Again, I hope I am wrong, but I've never seen this level of animosity from the white community since I've been born. And look, I went through the 60s as a conscious teenager, as a college student. It wasn't like that then. It's like that now. And you see, people used to be able to talk about it. Now they can't talk. And when people stop talking, when people stop communicating, the knives come out, then the guns come out, then the slaughter begins.
As I sit here and listen to you, what I think about is how I'm bookended in a lot of ways. So I'm bookended between my father, who with the murder of Emmett Till, like that shaped his childhood growing up in South Carolina, with parents saying you can't go out at night because you might not come back home. And I'm on the other end, I have my sons who are now going into college, and they've grown up with names Trayvon Martin, Freddie Gray. I mean, they've seen this and they're involved in that struggle. And here we are. It's like nothing has changed in terms of trying to get justice for Black people. And your work has been about trying to get this justice. So what does that look like from where you sit, Billy? What does justice look like for Black people?
Well, justice is impossible under the current criminal justice system we have now. And I don't know when people are going to wake up to, if we don't radically rethink what we're doing, things are just going to get progressively worse, because the one single thing that's happened within my lifetime that has set us back the most, I mean, really set us back to the point that it has destroyed the Black family, is mass incarceration. And mass incarceration can only come from a sense of injustice. It can't come from justice. And so what we've seen is the 40, 50, 60 years of over-sentencing Black people. That was true when I first started. But what wasn't true was that we didn't have millions of prisoners. We had only 160,000 prisoners in the entire United States, in both state, federal, and local jails. 160,000. Now it's 2.8 million. And that doesn't include all of the people that we have under control of the criminal bureaucracy on probation or parole, who can be sent back to jail just like that. And so when you count them, probably 6 million people in America who are either incarcerated or semi-incarcerated, and who have lost their freedom, whether they're in jail or out of jail because they're on parole or probation.
So with that in mind, because the things you're saying are so disturbing, even though you're laying out the truth of this country, and a lot of people are not willing to accept it, not willing to push as hard as we need to push. You have been involved constantly and consistently with pushing against this system, pushing against the direction that they want us to go to keep us oppressed. What would your advice be for the next generation? I said, go to school, become a lawyer. Like, we need Black lawyers, judges, doctors. Like, we need people to go and get into every single element rather than choosing only one path. What kind of advice would you give to this generation of high school graduates going into college? Like, what would you tell them with your experience and your long eye of history?
Well, you know, we really have role models of different races right here in the United States who can teach us a lot about that. For example, the Jewish community. Jewish community has been on the verge of extinction since the Christians decided that they were the killers of Christ. And so you see this constant barrage of racism against the Jews. They call it anti-Semitism, but it's a form of racism. Right. And they've been forced to live in poverty in most countries in the world. They have fought back in this country. They've made a tremendous comeback. They have their own country now, and they persuaded white Americans who have a 30% anti-Semitism rate to not only support Israel, but to give it all it needs by way of financial aid, military aid to survive and prosper. That's a hell of an achievement for people who number only 2% of America. But what's the reason for their success? The same reason for any community's success: family, education, capitalistic intent, meaning learning how to make wealth, not just money, but wealth, because wealth is what created Israel. Wealth is what you contribute to politicians in order to influence their decisions. Wealth determines the level of freedom that you will enjoy anywhere. And so that's what they did. And the difference between what they were able to accomplish, and by the way, they're 2,000 years working on this. This is only our 50th year out of semi-slavery. Right. And we're doing a remarkable job, but it's nowhere near to the job that's going to finish the job, or the effort that's going to finish the job. So what they did was they developed their own parallel school system to teach their own history. They got tired of asking the white man to teach Judaism and the history of the Jewish people. And so they have Hebrew schools in every city that supplement public school education. You even have to graduate from Hebrew school by showing proficiency. It's called a bar mitzvah or a bat mitzvah. And they also did something else. They formed their own banking system. They formed their own support system. They take care of their elderly. They take care of their children. They teach each other how to do business. And they have become the members of the most critical industries in all of the world. They don't mess around with jobs that are not critical. They make sure that their children are oriented towards going into every one of the critical professions and occupations in America. And they've had a tremendous influence. And that is while they still suffer from grievous anti-Semitism around the world. Jews are still moving out of Europe because anti-Semitism is again at an all-time high. And they're being persecuted everywhere in the world. Everywhere white folks, Christians can find Jews, there's persecution of the Jewish communities. And so that's a role model. If we do what they did, we will have a higher level of achievement than what we've gotten so far. But we don't have to just look outside of the Black community for role models. There are role models all across the United States. For example, in Harlem, there are educational programs that are terrifically turning out advanced mentality in Black people. We see world-class chess champions coming out of these schools. We see world-class science minds coming out of these schools. We see Black genius being developed because of the radical difference in education that these private efforts at educating Black people and Black families have achieved. And so we need to do that. But we can't seem to get out of our own way in Baltimore, where we have a school system that's top-heavy with bureaucrats who have the old way of thinking about teaching a different kind of kid than the one that's showing up for class today. Children without breakfast, without having meals on a regular basis, children that don't have clothes to wear, children who don't bathe, children who don't get enough sleep. How are we going to educate these kids by the old way of doing it? The answer is we're not. because our school system continues to be a tremendous failure. And educating people is not that difficult conceptually. It's not hard to teach kids if you're doing it with the proper funding and with the proper people. It's not rocket science how to do it. It's just not getting done. And so that's why we're in the pickle we are in today. We're raising kids in an atmosphere that's tragic and making them feel responsible for the tragedy that they have to live out every day.
So it boggles my mind, Billy, when I look at Baltimore City. Now, I'm very clear that people understand that I just got to Baltimore. I've only been here 18 years. And in Baltimore's lexicon, I just got here, right? So, but it boggles my mind to have so many Black people in positions of power, and yet our children don't have AC. To have Black folks in positions of power, and yet our children don't have a grocery store within walking distance of their own home. So it just stops me in my thinking and saying, okay, what have we lost? Because you defended, as you call them, the notorious Black Panther Party. But what my dad used to always say about the Black Panther Party is I understood that before people can march, they have to eat. No one's going to protest if they don't have food in their stomachs. So let's start with giving them breakfast. And then part two, you can't have people marching if they don't even know the name of the leaders who are taking them down the path. Okay, let's feed them and then let's educate them. And then we can talk about them becoming foot soldiers, because you can't get there. Like Ella Baker said, you can't be a foot soldier if you're hungry and you don't know who's in charge. It seems like the basics for us here in Baltimore. People are hungry and they don't know who's in charge. And so what do we do?
Well, we're doing it on a micro level. Mm-hmm. And that makes a lot of people happy. It doesn't make me happy because it's got to be done on a macro level, a large scale level. And I applaud all the people who are doing it on a micro level because they're trying to raise the money as best they know how. It's difficult. And so some years they have enough money to do the stuff they're doing. Some years they don't. But there's no overarching kind of approach that's taking place in the community. And even worse, our kids are not being inspired by community leaders the way we had it going on in the 60s. You know, our kids were getting inspired by the politics of that era. Right now, they're turning off from the politics. It is a terrible thing to see, and it's got to stop, and it's got to stop as soon as we can stop it. But who's trying to stop it? And so the cast of characters is very thin. Our bench is very thin. We're not in a position yet where we are even competing for the World Series or the national championships. We're in a period where our leadership today is much less capable than our leadership was 60 years ago. Now, you got to understand part of the reason for that. We had a program that was created by J. Edgar Hoover, the racist head of the FBI, that killed Black leaders, right, that discredited Black leaders, and did it thoroughly as we've ever seen any kind of leadership genocide take place. And so instead of having the 50 nationally known Black leaders we had in the 50s and 60s, how many can you name today? Yeah. 5, 6? And so our leadership has been deliberately destabilized and eliminated. We got to build it back up. But you see, part of the problem that mass incarceration has caused, along with the absolute failure of our public education system, is that we don't have that historical connect between the leaders who are now becoming my age and the young people who, for example, are very, very, very capably running Black Lives Matter. But there's a disconnect between the older leadership and the younger leadership in Black Lives Matter, and they're not getting the benefit of our historical experience, our failures, our successes, our mistakes, our corrections to those mistakes, how to handle the differences of opinion within the community in a healthy way that caused everybody to get more excited about what was going on. And today we have a kind of an Uncle Tom style establishment leadership, where the leaders that we have are very, very much motivated by the fear of white folks. I mean, let's call it like it is. They don't speak out. They don't ask or demand what we need. It's always a startup with a compromise in mind. And you can't get ahead if you don't ask for what you need, if you don't demand what you really need. You know, your wish list ought to be the things that really matter. They shouldn't start out being a wish list of compromise, no solution to the problem kind of items. And that's what we continue to see from Black leadership. And that's because, look, we're still very, very much affected by being enslaved and terrorized for the last 400 years. That has really harmed our psychology. And we know this. We know if you don't raise a kid the right way, he's going to turn out to be a bent kid. But if you raise that child correctly with love and respect and attention and persistence and exposure, then you get a different kind of human being. So what do you get when you don't have parents anymore? You get gangs. What do you get when only one person is in the household? You get a person, if they're working 2 jobs, they don't have a chance to raise the kids. What are you getting when you don't have even one functional parent in the household? You get kids that are raising themselves. And last time I looked, they don't do a good job raising themselves. They do a horrible job raising themselves. They don't learn about what's going on in the world. They barely know how to become adults. That's what happens when you don't raise kids. So the short way of looking at it is we're having a crisis in home training. We're having a crisis in home training. Most of the people in the inner city, the ones who are left, the ones who can't afford to move, the ones who are substantially underemployed or unemployed, the ones who don't have parents are not being raised right. And if you don't raise kids right, Lord help us all. They become the adults of tomorrow and they carry all of those problems into the world. And that's what we're seeing. I mean, did you see this latest indictment in federal court of these gang members?
Yes.
I mean, they're barely 20 years old.
I said that on my radio show, 20, 21, 22, running these major gang programs. They've been looking at them and watching them for years, and here we are. So you've been watching them since they were, 16, 17 years old, and watching them commit these crimes.
And by the way, look at what they're watching on television.
Yes.
Other thugs.
Yep.
Look at what they're hearing in the music. Other thugs. Mm-hmm. And so thugs are creating more thugs, who are creating more thugs. And thug behavior comes from an absence of home training. It's that simple. But if you've destroyed our families by mass incarceration, what else can happen? And if you have a pathetic response to the problem, instead of an all-out response aimed at solving the problem doesn't get solved, does it?
It doesn't get solved. So I have to stop you there. William Billy Murphy Jr., his successful defense of boxing promoter Don King in 1998 in a federal criminal jury that garnered national and international attention, he and his small but mighty Baltimore law firm, Murphy, Falcon, and Murphy, have gained a national reputation for legal excellence as trial lawyers. Mr. Murphy, it has been an honor and a privilege to speak with you. Thank you for your wisdom and thank you for your time.
And by the way, people who listen to your show ought to go immediately to your website so they can find out what a wonderful history you have, how well educated you are, how committed to the community you have been all your life, and the wonderful work you have done yourself. And so I invite you to go to the website, and if all you know is Dr. Kaye, you'll get the information. You'll get to the right place. Kaye, doctor.
Thank you so much, Billy Murphy.